Hi everyone. So today in this video, I will be giving you an overview about the work queues, which is actually a new feature in Power Automate. So work queues is actually one of the recent feature which has been released by Power Automate. And using work queues, you can even store, prioritize, and distribute and process work items. Like, for example, you have in an Excel file, you have a lot of data, and you want to process the data one by one. And you using work queues, you can do it, and even you can prioritize it as well. Okay, so if you have used tools like UiPath, this concept is similar to the queue which you have seen in UiPath, or if you have explored Robocop, there's a feature called work items. This concept is also similar to our this work queues is actually similar to that work items as well. So currently you are all seeing my page here. How you can navigate to the work queue. So for navigating to work queue in Power Automate, first you have to go to the monitor. First you have to be in the Power Automate page. Then you have to go to the monitor tab. Then under this you can find work queues. Okay, which is a preview one currently. You can just click on here, and once you click this, and you will arrive at this particular page. Now, how to create a work queue? To create a work queue, you can just click on new. You can provide the work queue name, just a description like what does this work queue actually stores, what is the functionality of it. And next is item default time to leave. Like you should provide the minutes. Okay, so how many minutes this particular item, because this work queue store many work items inside. So how many minutes this each work item should be present in the particular queue, or how much what should be the expiry time of that particular queue item. That is actually what the value we are specifying under item default time to leave field. Okay, this is a default value. It can be overridden at the work item level as well. Okay, once you fill all these details, you can click on create. Okay, these two fields are not mandatory. Only work queue name is mandatory. Okay, now you can see here I have created two work queue. One is first queue and RPA challenge. So for our purpose, I am using this RPA challenge. So let me open the RPA challenge. So once you created the work queue, mm, you can see that. See here, actually, I have uploaded some work queue items here. Okay, so this is actually a data which I have taken from this RPA challenge website. You can see this Excel file. Okay, so what I did here is I developed one Power Automate flow which will actually take each row and it will add a work item inside this work queue, and you can see the one of the work items like this. Okay, the format how they are storing the data. You see, this is how they are actually storing the data in the JSON format, and this JSON format will be used by the Power Automate flow. Okay, when they are actually utilizing each and every work item from this work queue. Okay, and every work item has been associated with a unique name. Okay, this is actually a default unique name provided. You can even specify your own unique name as well. Okay, and if you want to create a work queue item manually under this one, what you can do is you can just click on this new, can provide the name of the work queue item. If you haven't provided any name, it will provide a unique identifier. Okay. Next, you can provide the value. The value can be like a single value or like JSON format that we have seen here. And the processing nodes, like what's the like whether you want to provide some processing nodes, like for example, once you have processed a particular work item, you want to add some processing nodes like, okay, let's say in the case of invoice, once you process it, you get some transaction number. Maybe you want to attach the transaction number to this work item. At that point, you can make the bot to enter the transaction number to this particular processing nodes. And also, you can specify the expiration date. As I told you, when you are creating work queue, you can specify a default item to leave or the expiration date. Similarly, this expiration date can be set at the work queue item level as well. Okay, so okay, So this is how we will actually be creating what this is how the work queue as well as the work queue items actually are being generated. Okay, so you can see here some of the work queue item has been processed as well, and you can see there are actually many columns associated with work queue item. First is name, which is actually a name of the work queue item. Normally, if you didn't provide any name while we are creating the work queue item, it will generally result in a unique global unique identifier. Next is when it has been loaded. That NQ means when it has been loaded into this particular work queue. Okay, this has been loaded at this particular time, and the status. What is the status of this particular work queue item? Okay, so there are many status associated with the work queue item. For example, when the work queue item, let's say here we are using this Excel file, right? So when we are loading the data from the Excel file to this particular work queue item, normally the status of the work queue item will be the new status. Okay, and once the flow start processing it, its status will change to what? There are different status associated with a work item. So you can see here there is queue, processing, exception, on hold, processed, etc. So when you're adding a work item into the work queue in a fresh state, its status will be always queue. Then once the bot or once the flow starts processing it, its status will change to processing. Once the processing has been completed, if it is successful, it will become processed. If it has exception, it will change to except. Like the status will change to exception. Okay. And even you can change the work item status from here as well. Like for every queue, for every status, there is a limit to which you can change the status. You can see for queue, you can only change to processing on hold. You can't change to exception, right? But for processing, it is different. Okay. So that is one thing you have to remember. And also about processing nodes, I told you I have processed here three work queue items here. Okay, and at last I have put processing nodes like successfully enter the details in the website. Okay, so here uh, so here I have developed two flows actually here. One flow I have developed two flows, and first flow I will call it as a dispatcher flow. Okay, so the dispatcher flow, what it does is it will actually read this particular table from this particular file, and it will load it into the work queue. Okay, it will load it into the work queue RPA challenge. Okay, that's what it do. And here you can see that this is the dispatcher flow which I have designed here. So currently it is a manually triggering flow. You can change to schedule flow, etc. based on your requirement. For the demo purpose, I'm just using the manually trigger a flow option here. Okay, so you can see here first I'm reading the all the rows present in the particular table. Then I'm only selecting what the required columns from that particular value output, because the list row present in table may contain output may contain many other values as well, which we don't need. So for avoiding that, we will use a select action to include only the columns which we need. Okay, and the output of this particular select action would be in a JSON format, JSON array format, where each JSON object will have the details of this, something like I would say like this. Okay, now what we'll do is we will loop through each of the JSON object that is present in this particular JSON array, which is coming as output from this. And then what we'll do is we will add these details into the particular dataverse table. Actually, this concept of work queue is actually relying on this dataverse, because all the details, whatever we are adding in the work queue are actually getting added to a particular table. Okay, so there is two tables here. One is work queue, which is actually storing the details of the queue, and work queue item, which is storing the work queue items. Okay, so each work queue item has one work queue key, which actually represent the queue name, so that it can easily map to which queue item it is being referred. Okay, so you can see here we are using add to row, and here here what we are doing is we are actually trying to add each work item into this particular work queue item table. Okay, and now I'm using the name. Okay, the next field where I'm passing is a name. Name is the unique identifier. Okay, next part is work queue ID. What like since we are adding the details to the work queue items, I told you like in work queue item table we have all the work queue items irrespective of which queue item it is, it should have all the work queue items. But in addition, it should have one more table. Sorry, it should have one more column which represent from which work to which work queue item it has been added. Okay, so to make sure that to make the bot to understand that it should be added corresponding to this particular work queue. For example, in our case, we want to add this work queue item to what? RPA challenge work queue, right? So to make it to add to only this RPA challenge work queue, we should specify its ID here. That's what we have specified here. You can see here. Okay, and slash work queue. Then within the bracket, we'll provide this work queue ID. Okay, to get this work queue ID, what we have to do is we have to go to the work queue page and we have to just click here. Okay, you can see this one. Okay, this you have to copy and then you have to paste it here. Okay, now the next thing that we are going to pass is the input. Input is the input data that we are going to pass. Okay, in our case it is a current item because current item will be the JSON object. It should look something like this, I would say. Okay, something like this you can see because the current item should look something like this as a JSON object. Okay, now we'll provide the status reason. Status reason, you can select many status reason. Here we will be providing queue. Okay, so by this particular flow, when we run this particular flow, it will automatically add the work queue items by reading this Excel file. By reading this, I could say by reading this table, it will take each of the row and then it will add the detail into this particular work queue item. Sorry, particular work queue in a JSON format like below. Okay. Once we add these details, so here I have so once we add these details, we want to process what this particular work queue item. For processing it, I have developed one flow. I call it as a performer workflow. Okay, you can see here. Let me open that particular flow. Okay, I'm just leaving it. So yeah, so this is a performer flow I have developed. Okay. So what does this performer workflow will do is it will process each work queue item which has been added into this work queue. Okay. So what it will actually do is it will take each work queue item and it will open a desktop flow which will log into this particular RPA challenge website, enter the details and click on submit. That's all. Okay. So currently, it will be running for one run. It will consume only one queue item. Okay, so that is how it's currently being designed. Okay, so you can see here, it is manually triggering a flow. First, we are using performing a bound action. Okay, this is all the actions related to the work queue item. Work queue item are done on the dataverse. Okay, because the data for these work queue items are stored in the dataverse. That's the reason. Okay, so first we will be performing a bound action on the work queues table. I already told you we'll be having two tables. One is work queues table as well as work queue items table. If you just select, maybe you can just find from here. You can see here, sorry, 1 minute. Maybe I have to select it again. Mhm. You can see here work queue items and work queue as well you can find. Okay, work queue items store all the work queue item irrespective of the particular work queue with having the one of the column as having the details of the work queue, and work queue will only store the details of the queue. Okay, I'll be selecting this one. Now I'll be selecting there are, you can see for this particular table work queue we have two actions. One is clear work queue and DQ. I haven't explored clear work queue till now. I'm just D will be using DQ for our purpose. So what does a DQ will do is it will actually fetch one of the available work queue item from that particular work queue. Available work queue item means what it will do is it will fetch the queue item. It will fetch the work queue item which is having the queued status. Okay, that it will fetch from that particular table. Okay, and it will only fetch one at a time. When you perform a bound action, it will fetch only one work queue item whose status is queued. Okay, so once you get this particular what I would say data, or once you get the details of one particular queue item, and sorry, and also you have to specify what the work queue item ID. Okay, so that so that the flow can identify on which work queue it has to perform the action. So this work queue ID you will get from, I think, yeah, from here, that we I already have specified. Okay, and so this perform a bound action will only capture one work queue item which is having queued status. Now the next step is the output of this particular bound action will be having two. One is OData ID as well as body. So we'll be taking the body and then we'll be passing the schema of that particular body by taking the output by running it just simply, and then taking the output and then passing it to by clicking on generate on sample, you can generate a schema for that output. Okay. So now I'm parsing it because the data won't be, it will be in a JSON string, in the string format. So I have to pass into a JSON format. So the body will get passed into JSON format, and then once you parse into a JSON format, there is one field which will be called as input. Okay, so this input will contain all the details. Maybe the input, if I'm right, yeah, the input will be actually containing. You can see here will be actually having all the details. Okay, it is one of the properties of this particular JSON which we are getting as an output from this particular JSON. Okay, this input is one of the property, and its value will be like a JSON object. Now what we will do is this input property value is also a string. We have to convert it into a JSON object. For that, we'll be using another parse JSON and we'll be converting into a particular JSON object. Now, once we convert this into a JSON object, what we'll be doing is we'll be what we'll be doing is we'll be passing I have created one RPA challenger performer workflow which will actually pick up the values like first name, last name. These all this first name, last name is coming from this but output of this parse JSON to action. Okay, now which you can see here. Okay, and we'll pass all the details to it and the bot will run. Okay, and once the desktop flow has completed the process, next it will come to the this desktop flow, actually maybe I had to show the desktop flow so that you can understand better. Okay. Okay, so the desktop flow actually have so the desktop flow actually it will take this input and it will provide two output. Okay, one is processing nodes as well as you can see processing nodes as well as processing status. These are the two output variables that are generated by this desktop flow. Okay, the processing nodes will be containing some processing nodes which we need to add to the work queue item, and processing status will give you the whether the desktop flow action was successful or whether it was failed or like that. Okay, so you can see my current flow, it is getting open. Actually, it is a very simple flow which will just open that RPA challenge website, take those input details like first name, last name, etc. Enter those details into the particular field, and then it will click on submit, and then it will pass the output like processing notes and processing status. That's all. Maybe it is taking some time to the loading issue. Let's wait for some time. Yeah, you can see here it is just a very simple process where it is taking some input details as well. You can see, and here processing note and processing status are passed as output of this particular flow. Okay, and you can see here. It is just entering the details, clicking on the submit button, then it is waiting for 5 seconds, closing the browser, and then once everything is successful, it will set the processing status value as processed, means successful. Processing notes means successfully enter the details in the website, and it will end. And this is under a exception block. So if any exception happen, the error handling flow will run, which will which will actually set the processing status value as exception and processing notes as main error. Okay, it will actually capture some error and then it will terminate the Chrome process. That is how the performer workflow actually works here. Okay, and now based on the processing status, we will update the queue item. Okay, so if the processing status is exception, it will update the row. Okay, update the row means it will update the corresponding work queue item row. Okay, so for updating the work queue item, we'll first select the table name, that is a work queue item, because this is the table where we have the all our queue items, okay, work queue items stored. So now the next step, the next field is row ID. The row ID actually it actually represents the work queue item ID. For every work queue item, there is a specific ID. So that ID we are getting it from which field, which we are getting it from this action, okay, as the output. So that we'll be using here. Now we'll be passing what status. You can see here. We'll be passing some input details like processing result, like processing nodes, and status as error, and I will be passing the status reason as generic exception. Okay, this is how we'll update the status of the queue item. And sorry, I'm specifying always queue item, it is work queue item. Next, another case would be process. When the work queue item is processed successfully, it will update the row as similar. These two fields are similar. It will update the row as processed and status reason as processed. Okay, and as well as passing the processing nodes. So this is how the RPA performer or RPA challenge performer flow works. So it just takes the data from each work queue item, then pass into the cloud desktop flow, run it, and then we'll update the status of the work queue item. So that is how our RPA challenge performer workflow works. It's a very simple workflow which I have designed as part of my learning. I need to explore more around this. And I'm also hoping that Power Automate Microsoft team will bring an action within the Power Automate desktop for working with these work queue items so that we can also call or we can also retrieve the work queue item within the Power Automate desktop as well. That would be helpful in certain transaction where we need to do within the flow itself. That is one suggestion I would have. And I'm just whatever I have just shown you is just the learning which I have done around this particular new feature. I feel this feature will get nice update will get good updation, like will get good features in the next update as well. So let me just run this former flow. So I'm just manually running it. So just remember that whenever you run this flow, you will only take one queue item, process it, and update its status. Okay, we haven't made it to run iteratively, okay, or in a transaction manner. Okay. Okay, we'll run the flow. Okay, start running. Now let's go to our, you can see here, I think if I just refresh it, okay, it is taking some time. You can see the status of this particular queue item changed to processing. Okay, it is being processed. You can see here the desktop flow is running. It will take some time to execute. You can see here. Sometimes it will take some time to execute the process. Not sure why it is taking more time because uh, last time it was not taking much. Not sure why. Oops, I think stopped it. Maybe what I will do is I will try to run it again. I don't know why it is taking more time. So maybe I'll change the status of this queue item to exception. You can change it, right? I told you, you can change it any status. I will again change it to queue. Okay, so that I can reuse it again. Okay, so you have seen that we can change the queue item status, but there is some limit. Okay, let's test it once again. I think there was some system issues which actually make it to run faster or longer because last time when it was running, it was not taking much. Sorry guys, there was some issues with my browser, like it got closed unexpectedly due to some issues. So I think due to the desktop flow running because I have suddenly closed it because it was taking some time. So maybe the exception part has been started, which make it to run. That may be the reason. Maybe I'll try it again. Not sure why it was taking more time. Okay. Yeah. So let's see how it works. So it is running. Yeah, you can see here. Now it runs faster, right? You can see here it is opening the RPA challenge. Michael Robertson, Medicare, IT specialist. You can see. So yeah, it has executed successfully. Now it will go to switch to update that particular queue item status. Now if you go here and if you update it, you see this particular queue item has been successfully processed. And you can see it has entered you can see the processing note has been also been entered. Okay. So this is how actually the work queue item concept actually works in Power Automate. It is actually a nice feature. Like you can do processing like this, like in a transactional mode. And also you can set the priority on the basis of which you need to process the work queue item, etc. So this is just an overview around the work queue item. Hope you like this, and I hope you will experiment this feature as well. Thank you.